Good morning, metalheads of the internet, and welcome to a brand new episode of the Metal Meltdown. Today we are talking about the latest studio album from Periphery entitled Periphery 5, Djent is Not a Genre. And honestly, I might have to knock off a few points from the final score right off the goddamn bat because somehow Periphery, despite being super silly, super goofy, super self-aware, opted to call this Djent is not a genre instead of Djent is not a genre. How does that happen? Honestly, big time brain fart on y'all's part. You should know better. You should be disappointed in yourself. All jokes aside, this is the 7th full-length studio album from Periphery, American modern prog metal titans, champions, poster boys. They've pretty much defined prog metal in the 2010s, or at the very least been an integral part of it. Of all of the bands to emerge out of the Djent scene, the Djent explosion, Sumerian core, whatever the fuck you want to call it, in the late 2000s and early 2010s, Periphery are without question the most well-known, the most successful, and I would go as far as to argue also the hardest working of the bunch. I mean, they dropped 3 albums in the span of a year and a half. Juggernaut Alpha, Juggernaut Omega, and then Periphery 3, Select Difficulty. And now they're free of Sumerian and Century Media Records, and they're on their own label, 3 Dot Recordings, and they appear more confident than ever before. And with that in mind, I will say about Djent is Not a Genre, right off the bat, holy shit. They put 110 fucking thousand% into this. They put their hearts and souls into this thing. This thing is bursting with enthusiasm and life and color and probably some of the most creative and intuitive songwriting I feel I've heard from Periphery. Opening track Wildfire, for instance, after a few minutes of pounding, pummeling, emotionally charged proggy post-hardcore, ends up throwing in some really hip, cool, swinging jazz fusion kind of stuff. Like, for a good hot couple of minutes, this song has more in common with Miles Davis and records like Bitches Brew than it does with, say, Dream Theater or Between the Buried and Me. Then there's Everything Is Fine, which is a totally unhinged and erratic piece of, like, full-on fucking Dillinger Escape Plan worship, filled with ironic lyricism and anxiety and probably some of the most brutal performances I've seen on a Periphery record. On the opposite end of the spectrum, there's Dying Star, which is a dazzling, glistening, kind of post-hardcore, proggy, alt-metal ballad of sorts, filled with lush, intricate, sweeping guitars and strings and keyboards. It carries with it, too, a kind of uplifting, comforting, spirited optimism that I would nowadays expect of Devin Townsend. And then there's Wax Wings, which appears to borrow a page from the book of Protest the Hero with some more theatrical but still appropriate vocal dynamics and guitar pyrotechnics. Spencer Sotelo, especially on vocals, just absolutely fucking killing it on this thing. The lead vocals, the backing vocals, his roaring, high-pitched screams in the final moments, it's all just absolutely fucking perfect. That's right, you heard me, perfect. If we were rating this song by itself, strong 5 out of 5. Atropos is another cool number. I like the more contemplative nature of the lyrics. I also like the twirling, spacey, sci-fi guitar shredding in the very beginning, and I like how it kind of repeats through the rest of the track, weaving in and out of the forefront of the sound, adding a lot of weight and texture and contrast. Now, not every song on here do be a banger, unfortunately. For instance, Dracul Gra and Thanks Nobuo are just a little bit too fatty and bulky for my personal liking. They take a little bit too long building up genuine momentum and lose my interest pretty quick. Silhouette especially is a big-time what-the-fuck moment for the record, in my opinion. Everything about it, from the vibe to the lyricism, the atmosphere, the production, it just sounds and feels way too much like Periphery trying way too hard to make a contemplative synth-pop rock jam in the vein of something from the 1975. Spencer even emulates some of Matt Healy's vocal mannerisms on the track, and it's just cringe. It just doesn't work for me. Plus, all of these songs, maybe with the exception of Wax Wings, would benefit big time from a little extra trimmage. Like, this album is almost 80 minutes long, and it simply doesn't fucking need to be. You trim a couple minutes here, a minute there, you get rid of the symphonic finale to Wildfire, and then boom, immediately you have something a lot more cohesive, a lot more satisfying, and a lot easier to digest. And let's just be honest with ourselves here, no matter how you feel about this record, it's not up for debate that this thing is really fucking overproduced. Like, it is a loud record, there's a lot of compression, there's a lot of harmonies and tones and weird little morsels and sound effects, and for the most part it's cool, but sometimes, like in the very opening of Everything Is Fine, it just kind of sounds like a hot mess. Like, don't get me wrong, it's still a cool song, but it could do without all of these, like, sound effects and, like, atmospheric bits and weird guitar tones and janky riffs and shit. I don't want to say the record has a lot of highs and a lot of lows, more so a lot of extreme highs and a lot of, like, midpoints. You know? Which is, unfortunately, a common problem for Periphery. I've had this exact problem, to be honest, with every Periphery album beforehand. Think of it like this, ladies and gentlemen. Periphery 5, Djent is not a genre, is like a good piece of cake. Maybe it could be a little lighter, a little better cooked. Maybe it doesn't need all this extra fondant and icing and sprinkles and whatever the fuck, but credit where it's due, it's got a lot of flavor. I'm feeling a light, semi-soft 3.5 out of 5, leaning towards a pretty enthusiastic 3 out of 5. You know, it's a good, solid slice of sweet, sugary cake. It's pretty well made, you know. I'm not much of a baker myself, so props to Periphery. If it were a little more consistent and a little less dense, I think we'd be looking at a higher score, especially considering, like, how good some of the shit on here really, truly fucking is. But hey, whatevs, I still got more out of this album than I honestly expected. Like, I was not really pumped for this at all. And, you know, as far as Periphery fans are concerned, I think they're going to be fucking elated with this thing. I think they're going to go bonkers for this thing. I think that, you know, they're going to be like, album of the year, like, and good for them, honestly, fucking good for them. I would say check out some of the singles that have been released beforehand and then see how you feel about diving into this album, but do give it a shot, because there is seriously some good shit on here. Periphery 5, Djent is not a genre. It's good. It's kind of good. Yeah, sure. All right. And that is it for the Metal Meltdown. I'm not an expert, nor do I claim to be, so what do you think? Do you like this record? Do you not like this record? And what do you want to hear from me next? And thank you for watching. Make sure you press subscribe right here so you get updates on the Metal Meltdown fucking immediately. And as always, you have yourself a fantastic fucking day.